My name is Mackenzie Wilson. I'm 32 years old and I'm living two entirely separate lives. Today, I showed up at our annual family reunion wearing my usual modest outfit and light makeup. Aunt Patricia gave me that familiar once-over and sneered. "Still just a secretary?" The room erupted with laughter. If only they knew I now run Horizon Innovations, valued at $350 million. What none of them realized was that tomorrow, their urgent $100 million deal would need my signature as CEO. Before I explain how I built an empire right under their noses. Tell me, where are you watching from? Drop a comment and hit subscribe. If you love stories about underestimated women who rise to the top. Growing up in the Wilson home meant material comfort but emotional frost. Our 5-bedroom colonial in Connecticut radiated success from the outside, but inside, warmth was scarce, especially for me. My parents, Rebecca and Richard Wilson, built Wilson Enterprises from nothing, a real estate development firm that was fading by the time I hit high school. Still, we upheld the image. And they upheld their expectations. My 3 older brothers, Nathan, Bradley, and Christopher, were bred for business. Nathan, 6 years older, was the strategist. Bradley, 4 years ahead, had the charm of a born salesman. Christopher, just 2 years older than me, could win over any investor with a smile. Then there was me, the afterthought. The girl? The one expected to chase suitable interest. Dinner was never just dinner, it was a boardroom. My brothers pitched ideas and got detailed critiques. When I tried to contribute, I was met with indulgent smirks or annoyance. Business isn't really for women, Mackenzie, my father would say, not unkind but unshakably firm. Your brothers are built for this. My mother, who'd once had a promising marketing career before giving it up for him, would add, "There are other ways to contribute, sweetheart." But Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, was the cruelest of all. A divorcee who married into wealth and never worked a day, she made herself the family's social judge. "A lady doesn't worry about profit margins," she once told me when I was 13. "You should focus on your looks and finding a good husband. That's your investment strategy." The only one who truly believed in me was my grandmother Eleanor, my father's mother, a widow who quietly ran my grandfather's books for 3 decades without acknowledgement. She saw something in me no one else did. "They underestimate still waters," she'd whisper during our private chats, "but deep rivers move with purpose." She secretly paid for my business classes in high school and encouraged my ideas. When she passed at 22, I lost my only ally. Her inheritance was modest enough to finish college, not start a company. But what she gave me mattered more. Belief, one moment from when I was 16, still burns bright. I had spent weeks studying Wilson Enterprises operations after overhearing my father's concern about profits. I prepared a full proposal, marketing ideas, cost cuts, new approaches. I rehearsed for days. I still remember gripping that blue folder, palms sweating as I stood at the dinner table and said, "I've been thinking about ways to improve our market share." At first, they smiled like I was a child showing off a drawing. Then the smiles faded. Glances were exchanged. My brothers chuckled. When I finished, silence. My father cleared his throat. "That's creative, Mackenzie," he said. "But business is more complex than you think." Nathan chimed in, "Maybe stick to the school dance committee." Bradley snorted. Christopher, always the gentlest, offered interesting thoughts. "Mac, but you're missing some fundamentals." Then Patricia, who was visiting that weekend, delivered the final blow. "Richard, Rebecca, you really should steer her towards something more fitting. A pretty girl like her should focus on finding a husband, not playing CEO." They all laughed. I held back tears, collected my notes, and left. That night, I made a promise I would succeed on my own terms. One day they'd regret underestimating. College was my escape. I went to State University, not the Ivy Leagues like my brothers. My parents saw it as a step down but paid tuition, hoping I'd meet a man. What they didn't know, I was double majoring in business and computer science. I took night classes and worked days to cover extra credits. During my sophomore year, I met Professor Diana Lawrence, a retired tech exec turned educator. She Was the first person since Grandma Eleanor to take me seriously. You have something rare, Mackenzie, she said after reading one of my case analyses. You spot patterns others don't. You find doors where others see walls. She became my mentor. With her help, I built skills, a resume, and a network. During summers, I interned at tech companies, telling my family I was doing admin work. It wasn't a lie, I did start as an assistant. But I moved up fast. I impressed execs. I earned respect. I graduated with honors. But to my family, it was just a nice little degree before settling down. At the graduation dinner, Aunt Patricia asked when I'd be using my education to catch a husband. I smiled and said I was weighing my options. What I didn't tell her. I already had a plan. I accepted what looked like a lowly job executive assistant at a mid-sized tech firm. My family sighed with disappointment. What they didn't know was that the real plan had already started. I was staking my claim at the crossroads of real estate and technology, a world I knew from childhood but was about to redefine from the inside out. They had never once considered the possibility. After graduation, I chose a path designed specifically to keep me off my family's radar. Instead of joining Wilson Enterprises, where I knew I'd be sidelined into some administrative role regardless of my education, I took a job at Tech Forward, a mid-sized tech firm specializing in business solutions. To my family, I called it an executive assistant role. In truth, I started in business development. Just a stepping stone, I told my mother during our weekly phone calls. She seemed relieved, pleased that I had realistic expectations. My father didn't say much, just asked if the benefits were decent. My brothers cracked jokes about me getting coffee for people doing real business. I let them believe whatever made them feel superior. At Tech Forward, I dove in headfirst. I absorbed everything I could about how technology was transforming legacy industries. I volunteered for every extra project, worked weekends, stayed late. My curiosity centered on real estate development and property management, my family's business, where I could already see the cracks. Traditional systems were clunky, inefficient, and ripe for disruption. 6 months in, I noticed a critical blind spot. Developers were still using outdated processes to track progress, manage contractors, and stay compliant with regulations. It was costing them millions. On my own time, I built a prototype solution applying what I'd learned in my computer science courses. When I presented it to my manager, Jacob, he was impressed enough to set up a meeting with the company's CTO. They liked it, but wanted to steer it in a direction that ignored the root problems I had identified. That's when I realized I had to build this on my own. Not long after, I attended a tech conference in San Francisco, telling my family it was a required work trip. That's where I met Allison Reed, a brilliant software engineer frustrated by her company's limited vision. We clicked instantly. After a panel Q&A, we grabbed coffee and kept talking for over an hour. That platform you're describing? She said, it could revolutionize how real estate projects are managed. I know it could, I replied. But no one's building it, at least not the right way. Then maybe we should, she said casually. That one sentence sparked the beginning of Horizon Innovations. For the next 6 months, Allison and I built our plan, working late nights, meeting on weekends. I kept up the illusion at family gatherings, nodding along when they assumed I was still answering phones. At Thanksgiving, Aunt Patricia asked, still doing the assistant thing? Something like that, I replied while mentally perfecting our pitch deck for angel investors. Finding funding was the hardest part. I couldn't approach family contacts without exposing my plans. And most investors dismissed us, 2 young women with little experience. We faced 27 rejections. Then we met Samuel Granta, retired tech exec who'd made a fortune disrupting the insurance world. You're not just chasing a trend, he said after our pitch. You're solving a real problem, you understand. That's rare. He invested $250,000 for 15%. Equity enough for us to quit our jobs and go full-time. I told my family I'd been promoted, still an assistant, but now to a private investor. It explained the travel, the late nights, the increasing unavailability. They barely asked questions. To them, I'd simply found my level. That first year nearly broke us. Allison and I worked 18-hour days fueled by instant noodles and caffeine. We rented a tiny office in a rundown building. We hired 2 fresh CS grads who believed in the vision. There were technical issues we hadn't anticipated, market skepticism we hadn't prepared for. 3 months in, a massive coding failure nearly killed the entire platform. I worked for 3 straight days with Allison trying to salvage it. At 4 a.m. on the 3rd night, we cracked it. I cried from exhaustion, from relief we'd actually done it. Our first client was a small developer in Phoenix. They used our beta to identify a looming regulatory disaster that would have cost them $1.2 million. Word spread. That same month, we landed 3 more clients. Still, I kept the lie going. At Christmas dinner, as my brothers bragged about their Wilson Enterprises conquests, I sat silent. I'd just signed our 10th client. When they finally asked about me, I smiled and said, "Work's going fine. At least you're employed," my father grunted. His version of approval. As Horizon grew, so did the complexity of my secret life. I had separate bank accounts, a different email for family communications, a small apartment near my parents' house for weekend visits. While actually living in San Francisco, I became a master at deflection, always steering the conversation back to them. The emotional toll matched the logistical one. Every time they dismissed me, it stung no matter how far I'd come. So I built armor. I reminded myself I wasn't doing this for their approval anymore, and yet, some part of me still longed for it. I still wanted to see that look on my father's face, the pride he wore so easily for my brothers directed at me. Even just once. Why keep hiding it? Allison asked after a particularly brutal weekend with my family. "You've already made it further than most ever will." "I'm not ready," I said. "Not yet." What I didn't say was what haunted me most, that even with proof millions in the bank, clients, success, they might still look at me and say, "It's not enough." They might have found ways to belittle it. That's why I knew I had to build something so undeniable, so impactful that not even Aunt Patricia's sharpest jab could diminish it. So I kept up the double life, feeding my ambition with every dismissive comment. Every moment they overlooked who I truly was. Horizon Innovations kept growing. And with every milestone, my resolve deepened. One day, they would finally see me, but only when I was ready. And only on my terms. 3 years flew by in a whirlwind of scaling and strategy. Horizon expanded from our original 4-person dream team to more than 50 full-time employees. Our platform evolved into a powerful all-in-one solution integrating project oversight, regulatory compliance, contractor coordination, and financial forecasting. We moved from that cramped office to an entire floor downtown with sweeping views of the Bay Bridge. To my family, though, I was still just Mackenzie, the assistant. The split between my reality and the story they believed grew almost surreal. By day, I made decisions affecting multi-million-dollar deals, negotiated with top-tier investors, and led a thriving company. By night, on family calls, I was still doing fine in a safe, stable office job, still unattached at 30, still a mystery to them. At that point, Horizon was valued at $75 million after our Series B round. My personal net worth on paper was solidly in the 8 figures. Still, I dressed modestly for family visits. I kept a cheap apartment in Connecticut to maintain appearances. "You should think about buying instead of renting," my mom suggested once during a visit, assuming I was still living off an assistant's paycheck. "It's never too early to start building equity." I just smiled. I didn't mention that I'd already bought my San Francisco condo outright or that I'd recently closed on a Lake Tahoe vacation home. As we scaled, building my executive team became my top priority. I brought on leaders who balanced my skills and embraced the vision. Jessica Peters as CTO, Robert Martinez as CFO, and Tara Franklin as COO. They became more than colleagues, they became my chosen family. People who saw what I was capable of and expected more. "You're the most impressive founder I've ever worked with," Tara told me after a tense, high-stakes quarter. "Your instincts are razor-sharp." Her words struck deeper than she knew, filling spaces left hollow by a lifetime of being overlooked. Still, I kept my past hidden. I never spoke of my family. Only Allison knew the full truth. Our first major breakthrough came with a proprietary algorithm we developed. It could predict upcoming regulatory changes and allow clients to adapt, proactively saving millions and transforming how real estate development was managed. It was a game changer when Real Estate Technology Review featured our innovation. The headline read, "Horizon Innovations Redefines Risk Management in Development." I declined to be photographed, saying I wanted the spotlight on the product. In reality, I was protecting my secret. Company documents simply listed me as M. Wilson, CEO. I used a professional email address without my full name. We started acquiring smaller startups, integrating their strengths into our platform. Each move expanded our reach. By year 4, we were the dominant player in our niche, serving clients across North America and entering Europe. The complexity of maintaining my hidden identity grew alongside our success. I used shell companies and legal trusts to keep my name off public filings. One avoided industry events on the East Coast, especially in New York or Connecticut. Still, there were close calls. At a major tech conference in Boston, I spotted my brother, Christopher, across the room. I ducked behind our company booth and sent Allison to handle our presentation slot later. Over dinner, he casually told my parents, "You should have seen this company at the conference Horizon something. They're completely shaking up real estate tech." I almost choked on my drink. "We should look into them at Wilson Enterprises," he added. "Could fix a lot of our inefficiencies." My father barely looked up. "Those tech things are always overpriced and underwhelming." I bit my tongue. I knew our platform could fix every single issue Wilson Enterprises was struggling with, but I stayed silent. The hardest part of the double life wasn't logistics, it was the emotional isolation. Every win was celebrated with my team, but never with the people who raised me. Every personal milestone, my first luxury car, my first first-class flight, my first $1 million philanthropic donation was done quietly, with no family to share it with. I started seeing a therapist. Dr. Karen helped me realize the secret I guarded so tightly wasn't just about proving my family wrong. It had become armor, protection, a shield against their judgment. "What are you waiting for?" she asked me once. I didn't answer because I wasn't just afraid of the shock on their faces. I was afraid that even if I told them the truth, even if I laid out every achievement, they still wouldn't be proud. That even proof wouldn't be enough. During one session, she asked me softly, "What has to happen before you're ready to reveal the truth?" I thought about it for a long moment and finally admitted, I was waiting for something undeniable. Success so overwhelming, so absolute, that even my harshest family critics couldn't brush it off. I didn't just want achievement. I wanted leverage. And that chance came faster than I expected, though not in the way I imagined. As Horizon continued to grow, we made a pivotal move into government contracts. Our strategy was to create tailored versions of our platform for municipal development projects. That led to the formation of our new investment arm, Aurora Capital, designed to participate in public-private partnerships across the country. Aurora's team identified underperforming or high-potential projects where both our tech and our capital could drive transformation. What I didn't know then was that one of those projects would become the collision point between the two worlds I had kept carefully apart. I was in a quarterly review meeting with my executive team when my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Emergency family meeting this weekend. Your father insists, no exceptions." The timing couldn't have been worse. We were preparing for our expansion into the Asian market. But family emergencies were rare, so I knew it had to be serious. I booked a flight to Connecticut for Friday. I briefed my team that I'd be unavailable unless a true crisis hit. "Family stuff," I explained vaguely to Tara, "shouldn't take more than the weekend." I had no idea I was flying straight into a financial hurricane. Wilson Enterprises, my family's once proud real estate empire, was on the verge of collapse. The air was thick with tension as I stepped into my parents' living room. My father, Richard, looked like he'd aged 10 years since Christmas, his face pale, eyes heavy with stress. My mother sat beside him, holding his hand tightly, her usual poised expression cracked by worry. My brothers were scattered around the room, each of them visibly shaken. their usual smug confidence replaced with fidgeting and clenched jaws. And of course, Aunt Patricia was there too, seated primly like it was high tea instead of a crisis. "Well," she said sharply as I entered, "now we can finally begin." My father didn't waste time. "Wilson Enterprises is in serious trouble," he said, his voice thin, almost brittle. Westlake, their largest and most ambitious development, had completely imploded. Cost overruns, regulatory disasters, contractor disputes. A perfect storm.
He muttered. Westlake had been Christopher's brainchild, his chance to prove himself.
Worthy of leading the company's future? "We're looking at potential bankruptcy," my father continued. "Everything we've built for 40 years gone within months." My mother's hand squeezed tighter around his. "We've already taken second mortgage on both homes," she added, barely above a whisper. The realization hit me hard. It wasn't just the business. Their personal finances were at stake too. My father had always merged family money with the business, something I had quietly warned against in my younger years, though no one had listened. "How did this happen?" I asked, stunned at the scale of collapse. Nathan shot a glare across the room.
"Ask him," he snapped, nodding toward Christopher. "His project, his mess."
Christopher flushed. "You're the one who wanted to fast-track the schedule. We wouldn't have had half these contractor issues if we stuck to the original timeline." "Boys," my father warned, but the old authority was gone from his voice. Bradley jumped in next. "We all know the real issue was poor due diligence. Environmental remediation alone has drained millions, none of which we budgeted for." They kept arguing, pointing fingers. And I sat there quietly, listening. The mistakes they were listing: regulatory missteps, contractor chaos, timeline breakdowns, were exactly the kinds of problems Horizon's platform was built to prevent. The bitter irony made my stomach twist. My so-called secretarial job had helped hundreds of companies avoid this exact kind of catastrophe. And here was my own family collapsing because they had never once thought to ask what I really did. "What's the plan?" I asked, cutting through the noise. My father exhaled heavily. "There's one possible way out," he said. "Maxwell Incorporated has offered to buy a controlling interest." My blood ran cold. Maxwell. They were infamous in the industry vultures who swooped into struggling companies, stripped them for assets, fired loyal staff, and left behind hollow shells. "That's corporate suicide," I said without thinking. Every head turned to me. "And what would you know about it?" Aunt Patricia asked, eyes icy. My father gave a weak wave. "Maxwell isn't ideal, but they're the only offer on the table." "Actually," my mother spoke up, surprisingly firm, "there's another offer." She looked to my father, who nodded. Double quotes. "Yes, an investment group, Aurora Capital, has shown interest. They've proposed a $100 million deal that would save the company, complete the Westlake project, and allow us to retain partial ownership." I went numb. Aurora Capital. My company. The same investment firm I had quietly built as a Horizon subsidiary was now the lifeline my family desperately needed. "This can't be real," I thought, my heart pounding. "The terms are much better than Maxwell's," Bradley admitted. "But we don't know much about them. They're extremely private," Christopher added. Their rep was sharp. Knew the industry, knew our specific situation. Spoke like he'd studied us for years. "I knew who you was talking about. James Harper, Aurora's chief investment officer."
He reported directly to me?
He had no idea, none, that Wilson Enterprises was my family's company. I felt dizzy. "When do you need to decide?" I asked, my voice quiet. I asked, trying to steady my voice. "We have a meeting tomorrow with Aurora's CEO," my father replied. "If it goes well, we sign the papers immediately after. Maxwell gave us until end of business Monday to accept, otherwise." Aunt Patricia sniffed, cutting in. "I still believe Maxwell is the safer option. At least we know who they are. This Aurora group, they came out of nowhere." I bit down so hard on my tongue I tasted blood. The irony was almost unbearable. My company, built from the shadows by the so-called secretary, was now positioned to either rescue or acquire the very family business that had dismissed me for decades. "Where are you staying tonight, Mackenzie?" my mother asked, switching to practical matters. I booked a hotel in town. I replied automatically, my brain still spinning. Nonsense, she said briskly. Stay here. We need the family close right now, I agreed, reluctantly. I needed time to think. And to make calls. As the meeting ended and everyone started to scatter, Aunt Patricia intercepted me by the staircase. It's in moments like these, she began, voice syrupy and sharp, that we learn who the strong ones really are. She glanced deliberately at my brothers. Though I suppose it's a blessing you're not involved in the business. Too much pressure for a woman to carry, don't you think? I smiled thinly. Everyone handles stress differently, Aunt Patricia. Indeed, she said, faux sweet. Speaking of which, how's that little secretary job of yours? Still answering phones? The mockery in her tone was unmistakable. Even while the family company crumbled, she couldn't resist. Something like that, I replied. The same answer I'd given her for years. Well, at least you've got stability, she continued, wearing a mask of concern. Unlike your brothers. Though really, dear, you should have aimed a little higher. A woman your age should be more established. I excused myself without another word and slipped away to my old bedroom. It had been converted into a guest room now, but the ghost of my childhood still lingered in every corner. I sat on the edge of the bed and made an encrypted call to Allison. We've got a situation, I whispered. Aurora's in final talks to save my family's company. What? She gasped. That's cosmic irony. Or a slow-motion disaster. Maybe both, I said. James has no clue he's been negotiating with my family.
And
the CEO they're expecting to meet tomorrow is me. So what are you going to do? I stared at the faint outline still visible on the wall, the place where my business school acceptance letter used to hang. My mother had taken it down. Years ago. Said it cluttered the room. I don't know yet, I admitted quietly. But I think my cover's about to be blown, whether I'm ready or not. That same weekend, as fate would have it, was also the Wilson family's annual reunion event, impossible to reschedule, since relatives were already flying in from around the country. So despite the unfolding crisis, Saturday afternoon found us all gathered at my parents' lake house, maintaining appearances, pretending extended family milled about, laughing, sipping cocktails. Unaware that the very foundation of Wilson Enterprises was crumbling, I arrived deliberately late. I'd spent the morning on emergency calls with my executive team. We'd issued a temporary pause on Aurora's negotiations with Wilson Enterprises, citing internal review procedures. It bought me 24 hours, just enough time to decide what the hell I was going to do. The lake house looked the same as always. Manicured lawn rolling down to the dock. White tents arranged for a catered lunch. Children racing between tables. Clusters of adults standing in their usual social circles, laughing, sipping, gossiping. Nobody would have guessed that the hosts were on the edge of financial ruin. I wore a simple blue sundress. Department store brand, minimal jewelry, the uniform, secretary mode. In San Francisco, my wardrobe was high-fashion custom suits. Luxury labels. But that version of me didn't exist here. There she is. My cousin Emma called as I approached the tent. The career girl, heads turned. Smiles, some condescending, some polite, greeted me like always. I braced myself. Here came the questions. The passive jabs about my single status, the curiosity about my fictitious admin job. Aunt Patricia glided to my side, champagne flute in hand even, though it was barely noon. Mackenzie, darling, she announced theatrically, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. We were just talking. About you. Great. Tell everyone what you do again, she purred. Still at that little company? What exactly do you do there? Answer phones. Schedule meetings? Her tone was pure sugar-coated cruelty. Those kinds of roles were never considered real careers in my family. I assist the executive team. I said vaguely, the same line I'd repeated for years. My cousin Thomas, who worked in finance in Boston, chimed in. You know, Mackenzie, I might be able to help you find something with more growth potential. My firm's always on the lookout for sharp admin staff. That's so kind, I replied, the words tasting like ash. Thomas's firm, ironically, was actually one of Horizon's clients, though he'd never know. Given his mid-level role, she's content where she is, Aunt Patricia cut in. Right, dear, not everyone is driven by ambition. She turned to the others. Mackenzie's always been the cautious one. Safe choices. The familiar heat of frustration rose in me, but I swallowed it like I always had. Across the tent. My father caught my eye and gave a small shake of his head, his unspoken command to keep the peace. My brothers worked the crowd, pretending nothing was wrong. Nathan was in deep conversation with our uncle, a retired banker maybe seeking desperate advice. Bradley was charming a group of cousins, cracking jokes with that same salesman grin. Christopher stood alone by the water, shoulders heavy with guilt. Lunch was served, and I found myself at a table with Aunt Patricia, her daughter Melissa, and several other relatives, all eager to turn the conversation toward their children's glittering accomplishments. Jason just made partner. My second cousin Diane announced proudly. Youngest in the firm's history. Elizabeth's art gallery is opening a second location in Chelsea. Added another. My Stephen just closed a $20 million deal. Aunt Patricia declared, even though we all knew Stephen worked middle management and had likely been on the sidelines. Eventually, as always, the attention shifted. And what about you, Mackenzie? Any exciting news? Diane asked, her tone laced with polite disinterest. Before I could answer, Aunt Patricia jumped in. Mackenzie is very loyal to her secretary job. What is it now, 10 years at the same company? You don't see that kind of dedication anymore. The condescension hit like a slap. Relatives glanced at one another with mixtures of pity and smug relief. At least their children had real success. It's actually an executive assistant position. I corrected gently. Not that it would matter. Of course, dear, Aunt Patricia said, her smile patronizing. Executive assistant, much more glamorous. Do you get to order the fancy coffee now? The table broke into light laughter at my expense. Something in me cracked. 10 years of being minimized, erased, dismissed, and here I was, CEO of a tech company worth hundreds of millions, employing over 100 people, changing the real estate industry, still being mocked like I was the coffee girl before I could respond. A hush fell over the tent. Martin Sterling, our family's longtime attorney, was striding toward my father. His face was tense, his manner urgent. My father stepped away from the group to meet him halfway. They spoke in low tones, but in the sudden silence, a few words carried. Aurora's CEO insists on meeting the full family leadership. Deal may fall through without all principals present. My father's already drawn face tightened even more. He beckoned my brothers to join. I remained seated, watching as the pieces moved. Detached. Invisible. Like always. Aunt Patricia couldn't help herself. More business trouble, she mused loudly. That's what happens when a company refuses to adapt. If Richard had just taken Stephen's advice years ago, diversification, none of this would be happening. I blocked her voice out. Stephen had never offered anything of value to my father. My eyes were locked on my brother's expressions, concern shifting into alarm. Eventually, my father returned to our table. Mackenzie, excuse us, he said. Family business matter. The exclusion wasn't new, but this time it stung. I was being shut out of a crisis my own company was secretly working to resolve. Of course, I said automatically, standing to leave, but then Aunt Patricia again. Actually, Mackenzie might be useful after all. She is an executive assistant. Maybe she can tell you how real companies handle disaster. More laughter. Embarrassed looks from my brothers. My father, preoccupied, didn't even register the insult. We need to handle this privately, he said, nodding to the group. Enjoy the party, everyone. He and my brothers headed into the house with Martin. Aunt Patricia raised her glass. To the Wilson men, carrying the burden of legacy while the rest of us enjoy the fruits. I locked eyes with her. Something in my stare made her falter. Is something wrong, Mackenzie? She asked with false concern. Nothing at all, Aunt. Patricia, I said, setting down my napkin. If you'll excuse me, I need some air. I walked down toward the dock, away from the noise, the clinking glasses, the lies. I stared across the lake. Tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow, they'd find out that the so-called secretary was the CEO whose signature they desperately needed. But the real question was, what did I want that moment to look like? For years I'd imagined revenge, the stunned faces, Aunt Patricia stumbling over apologies, my brothers speechless, my father finally looking at me with something close to respect. But now, would that victory even feel sweet? My phone buzzed. A message from Allison. Decision time. What do you want to do? I breathed in the lake air, the same air I'd breathed as a teen, clutching a blue folder full of ideas they never took seriously. I texted back. Book the conference room at the Westin. 10 a.m. Alert the team. It's time. Back at the party, I made my excuses headache, fatigue. I drove off. In the rearview mirror, my family shrank smaller and smaller. The next time I saw them, everything would be different. Whether that change would heal or divide us forever, I didn't. No dot at the hotel. I laid out my CEO wardrobe. My armor. Tonight, I alternated between strategic planning calls and staring at the ceiling. Replaying 10 years of being underestimated. Tomorrow would end all that. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about integrity. About being whole. No. More double life. Tomorrow, I would show them who I truly was. Allison, her voice low but steady. Are you sure you're ready for this? She wasn't worried about the business move. Aurora acquiring Wilson Enterprises made sense strategically. It was the personal fallout that concerned her. No, I admitted honestly. But it's time. I had chosen my appearance with precision. A tailored charcoal suit, sharp, authoritative, but not flashy. Subtle makeup that enhanced rather than disguised. And one statement piece, my grandmother Eleanor's diamond earrings. My hair was swept into a sleek chignon. A deliberate shift from the softer style I wore at family gatherings. At exactly 9:55 a.m. I took my place at the head of the main conference room, facing the city skyline, my back to the door. My heart pounded like a drum. But I stood steady. Years of leading board meetings and investor calls had trained me well. No one would see me flinch. I heard them before I saw them. My father's familiar authoritative tone. My brother's overlapping voices. Speculating about the mysterious CEO they were about to meet, they entered as a group, still talking. The CEO of Aurora should be here any minute, Martin Sterling said, then stopped mid-sentence. They'd seen me. Confusion cut through the room like static. Mackenzie? My father said, blinking. What are you doing here? This is a confidential business meeting. I turned slowly to face them, holding my father's gaze without flinching. I know. That's why I'm here. My brothers exchanged glances. Christopher stepped forward. Mac, this is serious. Maybe Mom needs help with something while we're in here. His tone was gentle, but condescending like always. I didn't respond. Instead, I stepped to the front of the table and gestured to the chairs. Please, everyone take a seat. There was something in my voice, a note of quiet command they had never heard before. Martin, always attuned to shifts in power, moved first and took a seat. My father stayed standing. Mackenzie, I don't know what this is, but we're waiting for Aurora Capital's CEO. This is not the time for whatever this is. I looked him directly in the eye. The CEO of Aurora Capital is already here, I said evenly. I'm the CEO of Aurora Capital, and of its parent company, Horizon Innovations. Silence hit like a thunderclap. My father's face went blank. As if his brain hit reset before it could process what I'd just said, Nathan's mouth fell open. Bradley blinked like he was trying to refocus his eyes. Christopher's gaze darted between me and our father, trying to make sense of it. Martin. Sterling, ever the professional, was the first to recover. Miss Wilson, he said cautiously, are you saying you're the M. Wilson founder and CEO of Horizon Innovations? That's correct, Martin. The company currently valued at roughly $350 million. I paused, then added, $375 million after last quarter's results. My father finally found his voice. This is absurd. You're an executive assistant. No, I said firmly. That was a cover. I've been building Horizon for the past 8 years since just after graduation. But why? Christopher asked, genuinely baffled. Before I could respond, the door opened again. Aunt Patricia swept in, 15 minutes late, as usual for any meeting she considered beneath her. "Sorry I'm late," she said with a breezy smile, "but I hardly think my presence is needed for—" She stopped. Her gaze landed on me then, the stunned room. "Mackenzie, what is this, take your daughter to work day?" She laughed. Alone, no one else made a sound. "Patricia," my father said, his tone clipped. "Apparently, Mackenzie is claiming to be Aurora Capital's CEO. "Oh, don't be ridiculous, Richard," she scoffed. "She's a secretary." I pressed the intercom. "Send in the executive team, please." The door opened. Allison walked in first. Then Jessica, Robert, and Tara, each one dressed in sharp business attire, each one holding a tablet with presentation materials. "Allow me to introduce my executive team," I said calmly. Allison Reed, co-founder and chief strategy officer. Jessica Peters, chief technology officer. Robert Martinez, chief financial officer. And Tara Franklin, chief operating officer. They took their positions around the room, professional, composed. The power dynamic in the room shifted. Visibly and immediately. My family was suddenly outnumbered and outclassed. "This is preposterous," Aunt Patricia snapped. "Richard, call security. This is clearly a prank or some elaborate scam." "It's neither, Miss Wilson Hughes," Tara replied crisply. "Horizon Innovations and its subsidiary Oro Capital are well-established, fully credentialed organizations. We can provide any documentation you need to verify Miss Wilson's position." Robert tapped his tablet. The screen on the wall lit up, displaying Horizon's corporate structure, financial metrics, and media coverage, all with my name at the top, CEO, founder. My father slumped into a chair, eyes glued to the screen. "All this time," he whispered. "All these years." "Yes," I said quietly. "While you thought I was answering phones, I was building a company that revolutionized the very industry Wilson Enterprises is now failing in." Nathan's expression hardened into anger. "So this is it? This is why Aurora is interested in buying us? Some revenge stunt?" "No," I replied firmly. Aurora flagged Wilson Enterprises as an acquisition target through standard market analytics. The team didn't know about our connection until I told them yesterday. I had paused the negotiations the moment I uncovered the truth. "So what happens now?" Bradley asked, his instincts as a salesman already turning, calculating how to pivot in this new landscape. "That depends," I said. "Aurora's offer still stands, but I needed to have this conversation before moving forward. For obvious reasons. I had to disclose the conflict of interest." "Conflict of interest?" Aunt Patricia's voice shot up, shrill and sharp. "This is manipulation. Deception." I turned fully to her. "Deception, Aunt Patricia?" "Like telling a 16-year-old girl with real business ideas to focus on finding a husband instead? Like dismissing someone's entire career as just answering phones without once asking what they actually do? That kind of deception." Her face flushed crimson. "You've always been too sensitive," she snapped. "We were just guiding you toward realistic expectations." "My expectations were realistic," I said coolly. "I believed that hard work, innovation, and resilience would lead to success. What wasn't realistic was expecting my own family to ever recognize my potential." Christopher looked pained. "Mac, we never meant 8 years," I interrupted. "For 8 years I sat through family dinners while you all joked about my so-called job. You laughed at me at the reunion yesterday when Aunt Patricia asked if I finally got to order the special coffee. Do you even know how that felt?" My father raised his hands in a calming gesture. "Mackenzie, clearly we've underestimated you. That much is obvious now. But this subterfuge, it wasn't necessary. Why didn't you just tell us?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me," I said simply. "You would have dismissed it like you dismissed every business pitch I ever gave. I had to succeed first. I had to become undeniable. And now?" Nathan asked. "You've made your point. You've succeeded. Is the plan to let our company collapse to teach us a lesson?" The question hovered raw, direct, the emotional truth behind the meeting finally spoken aloud. My team stood silent but alert, watching with the kind of intensity that said this moment was no longer just business. It was deeply personal. I took a breath. No, Aurora's offer is real. It's strategic. It makes sense for both sides. Wilson Enterprises still has value, land, experience, legacy. Horizon has the technology that could have prevented the Westlake collapse in the first place. My father studied me carefully now, seeing not just his daughter, but a woman he'd never fully known. And the terms? He asked quietly. The $100 million valuation stands, I confirmed. The Wilson family would retain a 20% ownership stake. Asterisk, there would be roles for those with the necessary skills. Those willing to embrace our culture and integrate with our systems. Bradley, always the tactician, spoke next. And who would lead this merged company? Aurora's leadership will remain, I said, steady and clear. That includes me as CEO. The implication landed with force. For the first time in their lives, my father and brothers would answer to me. If they stayed, Aunt Patricia gasped theatrically. Richard, you can't be serious. It's unnatural. You should take Maxwell's offer instead. Maxwell would gut the company and fire everyone, my father said, cutting her off for the first time.
He still hadn't looked away from me. You really built all this? Yourself? His voice was lower now, worn thin with disbelief.
And something else, respect. Yes, I answered softly. With an incredible team, but yes. He nodded slowly. I want to see the full terms. We'll need to discuss it as a family. Of course, I said. My team prepared everything. We'll give you privacy to review. As Allison, Tara, Robert, and Jessica handed out tablets with the acquisition materials, I noticed Christopher watching me, his face unreadable, eyes scanning mine. Then he smiled small, rueful. All those times you asked about our projects, he murmured. You weren't just being polite. You were gathering intel. I was trying to help. I corrected him. You just weren't listening. As we prepared to leave them to deliberate, Aunt Patricia made one final stab. This is still manipulation, she said loudly. Using family vulnerabilities to swoop in like some corporate vulture. I stopped at the doorway, turned to face her. No, Aunt Patricia. This is business. The thing you always said I'd never understand. Then I walked out, leaving behind the legacy they had clung to, and the version of me they had always failed to see. I'd heard he'd launched a boutique development firm in Chicago, keeping minimal contact with the family. His exit had been tense but in the end, necessary. His top-down management style clashed hard with our data-driven systems. Bradley, on the other hand, surprised everyone. His sales acumen translated remarkably well to our expanded client initiatives, and he showed a level of adaptability to our tech infrastructure that no one expected. We weren't exactly close, but we'd built a professional respect, mutual, measured, and productive. Christopher had struggled the most with the transition, initially blaming himself for the Westlake collapse that had sparked everything. But after deep soul-searching, he accepted a new position leading our community development programs, where his genuine passion for neighborhood revitalization could finally shine. At my suggestion, he began an executive MBA program, filling the gaps in his previously intuitive, now evolving leadership approach. But perhaps the most unexpected transformation came from my mother. After the shock faded, she pulled me aside at lunch one day, eyes brimming. I should have supported you, she whispered, tears breaking through decades of restraint. I let my own compromises define the limits I set for you. Our relationship has been healing slowly, but surely. She began opening up about her abandoned marketing career, and I helped her reconnect with her skills through mentoring work for women entrepreneurs. Aunt Patricia, of course, remained. Aunt Patricia, sharp-tongued, critical, and forever convinced that my success was a mix of dumb luck and manipulative tactics. I'd made peace with it. Her approval was never coming, and more importantly, I no longer needed it. Quite a turnout, Allison said, appearing beside me at the railing, watching the merger celebration unfold below. Better than projections, I replied. Cultural integration's moving faster than even we estimated. She nodded toward the entrance. My father had just arrived, alone, noticeably without my mother. I made my way through the crowd to greet him. At family events, our relationship had become cordial but distant. This was his first visit to a company event since the ribbon cutting 3 months earlier. Dad, I said, genuinely surprised, wasn't expecting to see you today. He glanced around the redesigned atrium, once the traditional lobby of Wilson Enterprises. Thought I should check in, he said. See how things are shaping up. We stood in a brief, awkward silence. Then he added, your mother wanted to come, but she's at that mentoring event, her women's entrepreneurship group. I know, I said with a small smile. I helped her prep her slides yesterday.
He nodded, still visibly adjusting to this new rhythm, this reversal of roles between the daughter and the wife. The quarterly report looked strong.
He offered. That Westlake turnaround? Your new systems cut the cost significantly. From him, that was high praise. The technology helped, I said. But it was your land strategy that gave us something to build on. The silence that followed was a little less uncomfortable. Then came the question. The one he'd asked in different forms for months. I still don't get it, Mackenzie. Why didn't you just tell us? 8 years. Your own family. I paused, weighing how to answer. We'd talked around this before, but here, in the walls of the company I'd built from scratch, maybe he'd finally hear me. Do you remember when I was 16? That night at dinner, I pitched that marketing efficiency plan? He looked away. We thought you were joking. That's exactly it. You didn't take me seriously. You never did. If I had told you about Horizon back then, would you have believed me? Would you have supported it like you supported the boys? He didn't answer.
He didn't need to. I had to do it alone, I said softly.
No family connections. No inherited name opening doors. I needed to prove to myself that I could. And now, he asked, was it worth the deception? I gestured to the celebration around us. This, I said. This is worth it, building something that matters, that's worth it. But the deception? That left scars I'm only just beginning to face. He stood silent for a moment, then murmured, your grandmother would be proud. The words hit me hard. She always said you had the sharpest business instincts in the family, he added. I should have listened to her. The mention of Grandma Eleanor brought a sudden sting to my eyes. I wish she could have seen this. She knew, he said quietly. Maybe not the details, but she knew you'd make it. That's why she left you those earrings. I touched the diamond. Studs in my ears, the same ones I wore to the Revelation meeting. The ones I wore to every major decision since. I didn't know they meant that. I whispered. She called them her lucky charms. He smiled faintly, especially when dealing with men who underestimated her. Before I could respond, clients approached. I moved to greet them, but not before catching a glance from my father. He was watching me with something I'd never seen before. Respect. And maybe, just maybe, regret. That night, after the celebration, I sat alone in my office reviewing expansion plans. A knock on the door. Christopher, got a minute?
He asked. Sure. Everything okay with Riverside?
All good, he said, settling into the chair across from me. But that's not why I'm here. He hesitated, then continued. I owe you an apology, not just for the past few months, for, well, our entire lives. I set my tablet down, listened. I never tried to undermine you, he said. But I never stood up for you either. I benefited from the way things were. I didn't question it. That was wrong. His honesty disarmed me. Christopher had always been the gentlest of my brothers. But gentleness without action still leaves you alone. Why now?
I asked. He exhaled. My MBA class, unconscious bias.
It was like the professor had grown up at our dinner table. Then he added, but mostly, I've seen you in action these past months. You're brilliant at this, better than Dad, better than me, better than any of us. The words landed harder than I expected. Thank you, I said. He smiled. Do you think we'll ever be, a real family? Not just business partners who share DNA? I paused. I think we're building something new. Not what it was, but maybe something better, something real. After he left, I stared out the office window. The city lights shimmered below, and I thought back on everything. The revelation had brought professional triumph, but also grief for the family I'd wished for, and the one I'd actually had, with a therapist's help. I was finally beginning to process it all, the victories, The bitterness, the validation, and the wounds. Our merger had exceeded all forecasts. We were now a model case study. I'd stepped into the light, speaking at conferences, appearing in press features, accepting what had once been unthinkable. Public recognition, the unexpected result. Hundreds of messages from young women in business. They saw themselves in my journey. So I created something new, the Eleanor Wilson Foundation. Named after my grandmother. It funded and mentored women in tech. At our first event, I shared the stage with my mother, who spoke about ambition, about women lifting other women. Watching her was the most healing moment of all. A buzz. A text from Allison. Board meeting tomorrow, 9 o'clock sharp. Life always moving forward, but now it was on my terms. The company I built in shadows was now thriving in daylight. The family who dismissed me was slowly seeing me clearly, some with pride, some with resistance. And I was becoming whole. For the first time, the journey didn't end with the reveal. It began there. There will always be people who doubt you. People like Aunt Patricia who will never change, but I don't need her approval. I don't need anyone's. I know who I am. And finally, they do too.